Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the final tutorial for this semester. And it's my last effort to help you with your comparative essays. And it's a good opportunity for you to ask any questions if you have any. So your deadline is tonight, actually, although you can submit for another week. I wouldn't recommend that because, of course, I do have to deduct marks as a penalty if you submit late. I'm also just opening up the Q&A so that people watching from home can also ask questions. Feel free to do that. Otherwise, as you can see, there's the chat, and you're welcome to type anything you need to know there. Great. So let's go on to our work, our actual slides about comparative essays. There's the screen share. Right. So the first thing that I want to say is that I'm going to re-highlight here the three choices that you have. I'm sure you've already chosen one of these, I sincerely hope so, but I cannot give you answers in the sense that I cannot say too much about what you're supposed to say in each question, but I can give you outline and theory about how to tackle them. So this should be useful to you. Your assignment is to write 1,000 or up to 1,200 words, and please don't forget to say how many you've used in brackets on one of these questions. Here's the first one. Make sure we understand this together. Comment on this criticism of Fugard's play The Island as compared to Death and the King's Horseman by Soyinka. You may agree, disagree, or partly agree, but you have to support your opinion by referring to specific details in the text. That means the plot, what happens, as well as the words and the characters and so on. Now here is the criticism. They say comment on this criticism. Here is the criticism, and it's interesting to notice that we have quotation marks within quotation marks. You use single quotation marks for The Island and for Death and the King's Horseman, because the quote of the criticism itself is in double quotation marks. The Island is about African people in South Africa, but it is not essentially an African play. The play is rich in human terms, filled with compassion, but ultimately it is not convincing. Death and the King's Horseman, on the other hand, is culturally rooted, and it does not make unnecessary concessions to European art. That is what some critics said. And I haven't given credit to this critic because actually I made that up myself. It's just a possible criticism of the play, so don't think I have failed to write it up in a bibliography. Now, you may agree with a critic or not, and you may agree with his criticism or not, and those two things are different. When he says that The Island is ultimately not convincing, you may disagree with him if you give your reasons for disagreeing with him. But it's more important to deal with what he says. Now, The Island, as you know, is Robben Island, and it's political prisoners during the apartheid years performing Antigone. And what this critic thinks is that that isn't very African. Antigone is a Greek play important in European art. These two African men are in a desperate situation, but it isn't of their own cultural making. Whereas Death and the King's Horseman is utterly African. It's a story that many Europeans find very difficult to understand because it really is a true African story from African history and culture. And you have to respond to each one of these comments and things by referring to the plays and saying whether you agree, disagree, or partly agree. I think it's a very interesting challenge. Let's look at the other questions. 2 and 3. Do you think that Athelfugard's use of Antigone by Sophocles in the island is a brilliant stroke of genius or an insensitive mistake? And support your opinion by referring to both plays in some detail. So you've got to look at the original Antigone, and then you've got to decide whether in fact it really can be relevant to the situation of the men in the prison on Robben Island. And there are many things you can do. I'm not allowed to say too much at this stage because people are busy writing and submitting their plays. But let's go on to question 3. And this is the other possible comparison. Antigone by Sophocles and Death and the King's Horseman by Wole Soyinka have completely divergent settings. Yes, one is in Athens and the other one is in Nigeria. And they're in different times and ages as well. Yet, both plays make use of a chorus of some sort, and both rise surely from the societies in which they are set. In your essay, show why and how this statement is true by referring in detail to the texts. So you see, every single question reminds you to refer in detail, in detail. Generalizations will not get you very high marks at all. They're just the beginning. So the question has a generalization. It says they both use a chorus. It says they rise surely from the societies. You must show where and how this happens, and then compare them and contrast them. Please remember that when you write a comparative essay, you are also writing about the differences. It's not only about the similarities. Let's continue. Now, I want to give you some ideas on what to compare. I'm helping you with ideas, and you can check if you've already written your essay, check and see if there's something you can add to it to make it better after considering all this. First and foremost, study the question carefully. Be sure to answer whatever is required in the question. So compare what they ask you to compare. Don't go off and become irrelevant. You know that if you do not answer the actual question, then you lose a lot of marks. But that might be not enough. You need more. So, in addition, because these are plays, you could possibly compare these aspects. But these are not compulsory, so don't force them if they don't fit in with your understanding. You've got to write a play from your heart and from your mind as you can see these plays working. But here are some ideas and tips, okay? First of all, look at characters and character development, if any. Sometimes the characters don't change very much. They are the same characters at the end of the play as they were at the beginning. So there might not be character development, but there certainly are interesting characters in all these plays. And you can call them the personae. Are they similar in any way? And also, how can you contrast them? Now, an obvious example would be Antigone in Antigone, and then the man who plays Antigone, Winston, in The Island. They're both going to be Antigone. One is only going to be Antigone in a prison play, but nevertheless, you can compare those two characters. It could be really interesting, and see if you think it could work in that way, what is similar about the circumstances and so on. Good. Now, dramatic irony. Go back to Unit 1 if necessary to refresh your memory. Remember, you learned all those devices, and one of them was dramatic irony. I'm going to help you by refreshing your memory right now. Dramatic irony is quite different from irony in that it's got a different definition. Dramatic irony happens when somebody knows something that other people don't know. And when I say somebody, that includes the audience. So you've got the audience, and you've got all the different characters in the plays, including the chorus in the Greek play. Now, if the audience is being kept in the dark, whereas the characters obviously know something, that's dramatic irony. If the audience and maybe one of the characters knows something which another character doesn't know, that's dramatic irony. So it's not really very complicated, but it does create dramatic tension because everybody is waiting either to find out or to see what happens when someone else finds out what is going on. Good. So in your plays, you can compare the use of dramatic irony in the two plays that you have chosen. In the question you have chosen, I should say. Then you can compare the settings, and remember there are always two settings. The one is the setting in place and the other one in time. So we know, for example, that let's choose Antigone again. That is set in Athens, and we know that Death and the King's Horseman is set in Nigeria. And we know that it's the 20th century as opposed to the 1st century BC. Okay, I think better go and check that. I'm not 100% sure of that date, but certainly a very long time ago. And then you can talk about the effect. What effect do these different settings have on the action and the unfolding of the play? And talking about unfolding, you can compare the plot or the story. Which one is more complex, which one builds up to a higher climax, which one is straightforward, which one is more moving, or whatever occurs to you, you've got to think. That's the big thing about a comparative essay. You have got to think hard about these two plays in the question. Why did the playwright write the play? What was he hoping to achieve by getting audiences to watch this play? That's a big question, and you can certainly write a comparative paragraph about that. And finally, don't forget each playwright's unique style of writing, the kind of language he uses. Does he use long, complicated sentences or very everyday short sentences that are very clear? Is he very poetic? And are they similar in this way, or are they different? So there you are. There are lots of things that you can compare. Good. In fact, you might have too many, and if your essay gets too long, you choose only the most important ones. Now, there are two ways you can tackle this comparative business, because you've got to work out the nuts and bolts of how to present your comparisons. And of course, you'll be looking at similarities as well as differences. And so your first method is that you can take it point by point. In other words, if you are talking at the moment about the plot, then you discuss the plot first in the one play and then in the other, alternating between the plays. Okay, so for example, you might have one paragraph about the style of writing of Athol Fugard, and then another paragraph about the style of writing of Sophocles, which is certainly similar in some ways. Okay, if you don't have enough to say, it's possible to put all that in one paragraph about the style, and then you cover both plays in that paragraph. As long as your topic sentence makes it clear, this paragraph is about style. Good. Now, the other method is a little more dangerous, but it does give you more freedom. And this method is where you discuss play number one and you finish discussing it. You discuss the island entirely in a few paragraphs, okay? And then when you finish that, you go on to the second play and you write a few more paragraphs discussing the second play. So now you're making your comparisons not point by point, but play by play. And it gives you more freedom, but you've got to be very careful that you don't go off on a tangent and that there isn't enough being compared. Right, so that's your choice. Now let's look at ideas on how. We've said what you can compare and how are you going to write this. Once again, the best advice I can give you, I hope you are really taking this in, is that you need to be as specific as possible. Don't generalize if you can give a detail or an example. Quote some key words in quotation marks, of course, where they are relevant. Don't quote for the sake of quoting, but a good quotation takes you into the text when it's relevant, and it's an excellent idea, and give your inline reference right there, and then, of course, write a bibliography at the end. Now, here's some advice that may surprise you, but I can assure you this is good advice. Plan your paragraphs. Let's say you've decided to go point by point. So now you're planning your paragraphs. You're writing a paragraph about African culture. You are writing a paragraph about the island and Death and the King's Horseman, talking about African proverbs, language, okay? And you're going to write a paragraph about this and a paragraph about that. You've planned all that. So write it. In other words, write the body of your essay first. And when you know what you're going to write, then you should be inspired to write a nice, powerful conclusion. And the conclusion mustn't have new information in it. It must pull things together in a meaningful way. And because this is a compare and contrast essay, look at this last paragraph. In your conclusion, you may, if you wish, cast a vote in effect. You can say that you actually do believe that this play is far more rooted in African culture than the other play, if you've answered question number one. So having considered everything, do you wish to pass a judgment like this? Just don't be too harsh or too emotional. Remember, this is an academic essay, but make an academic choice for good reasons which you have explained, okay? And then, lastly, write your introduction. Believe me, if you take this advice, you'll see how much easier it makes your task. Because now you know your whole essay. You know what you're saying. You know how you've concluded it. And now you want to put that in a summary of a summary. In other words, in your thesis statement, in the introduction. And you can do that really well because you've done the essay and you know what's in it. And don't forget, it's a bit boring if you just give me an introduction with a thesis statement. I am going to do this. Try to think of a hook something really interesting to grab my attention in the very first sentence. And when you've done that, you'll get to your thesis statement, and that'll be great. Okay. Now, that's all I have for you, actually, when it comes to the essays, the comparative writing. And this tutorial is going to be uploaded to tutorials in your Funda page, so you'll be able to look at those again. But I'm not allowed to, at this stage, of course it wouldn't be right, to give you more details of what you should say. That's up to you. And since this is our last assignment, I decided that now we're going to just enjoy reading an interesting passage together. And it's not very long, and when we have read it, there'll be questions. So we're ending our tutorials with a reading comprehension that I think you will find very interesting. So let's do that. Right. A passage for reading comprehension. I'm pausing a second to see if there are any questions under Q&A. No one at home seems to be burning to ask anything, so we can get started. There are aspects of our heritage that are highly camouflaged, none more so than what some call ngoma and others guma. Ngoma was brought to the Cape by the Mazbikar slaves, not from the east, as some have contended. Mazbikars were the slaves that came from a wide range of countries in East and Southern Central Africa. Countries like Zambia, for instance. And they came to the slaver station in Mozambique and then on to the Cape of Good Hope. The Ngoma found ways to blend with trance dances and chants of the Kuna or Khoi people and San. Though Ngoma means drum, it is also the name of a set of spiritual practices that can be found across Southern Africa in many cultures. In some languages, it also means music. So you can just say Ngoma, but if you're talking about one drum, you say the Ngoma drum. Okay. By the way, the Kuna at some stages have been called Hottentots and the Sun, the Bushmen, but those names became so derogatory that we don't use them anymore. Right. There's a picture of some examples of Ngoma drums. And the writer then goes on to talk about Heritage Day. South Africa has a Heritage Day on the 24th of September. For some, this is yet another occasion to take time out from working, if one is lucky enough to have a job, enjoy a dop, braai meat, and party. See, party can be used as a verb as well, right? Others have turned it into Braai Day, which is being commercially exploited, and yet others have reduced it to socio-political statements about a variety of causes draped in heritage regalia. He's poking fun at everyone. I think basically the so-called colored people, the white people, the political parties. He's criticizing all of us and saying, is this all that heritage means to you? I want to invite you to listen it and allow the Ngoma to speak to you as it has spoken to people over the centuries. This is surely a significant artifact of our heritage. We should reflect on the triumphs and the tears and the collective spirit of the living and the dead who have faced and risen above adversity. Why don't we allow the drum to tell us something? Or are we too noisy to hear its message? White noise often seems to blind us and deafen us. Our land and people cry out for healing, for social balance, and yet the syncretic values of Ngoma, a gem of our heritage, has been set aside. Most people are so alienated from it that they do not even know it. Sit still and hear the drumbeat. Explore the thoughts that it inspires about the social and political scene, about ordering and transforming. I want to pause just to say, please notice these two words, because you're going to need them when we ask questions. Look at that, syncretic, and how you spell it, okay? It means harmonizing, pulling together, merging, even if not 100%, at least to some extent. And then the word alienated, right? And I just want to say I based this passage, I adapted it from something written by Patrick Mellett, who is a member of the so-called colored community. So he's directing a lot of what he's saying at this community. Final paragraph. I need to explain these words as well. Iconizing means making an icon out of it. He doesn't want aspects of our heritage to become icons. He doesn't want them to be in dusty museums. He doesn't want them to become commodities either, a bit like the vuvuzela, which is now a plastic mockery of the original. It's become something people can even make money out of. He doesn't want it put on a pedestal, okay? Good, let's start. Our heritage is not for iconizing or commodifying and putting on a pedestal, but it ought to work for us, to speak justice to us, to bind us, to work for transformation, to inspire, to build, to take all those many contributions of our ancestors who fought for so much and to give them life. The contributions, to give the contributions life. The sound of the cowhide drum, the rhythm of the dance, the manifestation of the spirits, the culture which binds us across time as one great soul, the dust thrown up as our San and Kuna ancestors danced around the fire, the sounds of voice and drum, the ngoma of the Mazbikar slaves. All of this was more than ritual and outward show. Do we contemplate its deeper meaning? At the end of our next Heritage Day, let us contemplate a while the power of this deep indigenous culture and the place it should have today. And there's my bibliography. There's Patrick Mellett, brilliant scholar, by the way. And if you're interested in this kind of topic, the 7 Steps of District 6 is a brilliant article explaining the 7 different threads of humanity that all made up the colored or the indigenous people. He calls them the Kamissa people, which is a fascinating name because the first little stream, the freshwater stream that ran down from Table Mountain, down Adderley Street into Table Bay was called the Kamissa by the Khoi people, and it means sweet water. The Dutch people made it into a canal, and they called it the Herengracht, meaning the canal where gentlemen walk. And eventually they made it follow a different route, and it dried up and so on. But this is a really interesting site if you are interested in this kind of topic. Another relevant book was written in Holland by Van Dijk, and it's The Quest for Fruition Through Ngoma, subtitle, The Political Aspects of Healing in Southern Africa. And it was published by Indiana University Press. Okay. Questions. Let's see if you can answer these. Okay, are you sitting with your fingers at the keyboard? I hope so, please. And get ready to type an answer for me. Why were slaves from such a wide area, all over Africa, really, why were they called Mazbikers, as though they all came from Mozambique? Why was that? Do you remember? I'll give you a moment just to give me an answer. I see there are a few groups here. Etienne, have you written something? Eden? Yeah, let's see what you say. They didn't all come from Mozambique, but they were called Mazbikers. Why? You see, they weren't all from Mozambique. Good try, but they all came through Mozambique. They came from all over, and there was a slaving station in Mozambique. So wherever they came from, they came through Mozambique, but they weren't all Mozambican people. And what was the first home of the Ngoma in South Africa? How did it fit in? Who did it fit in with? How come it found a home here? Yes, I see our people watching from home are not very, they aren't people who are typing, but our venues are typing. Yes, they found a home among the San and the Kuna people, also called the Khoi people, and that was. Yeah, it was in the Eastern Cape, for example. It was also here, all over the Cape, the current Cape province, where these people were. And they say that it fitted in with their trances and their chants and everything like that. Now, what is a dop? Do you know? If you're South African, you should know this. What's a dop? And why does the writer put this in quotation marks? A dop. Well, I'll answer the quotation marks. Yes, good, very well done. It's a drink, it's an alcoholic drink always, not a cool drink, of course. And he puts it in quotation marks because it's actually Afrikaans slang. So he can't just use it in an English essay. And number 4, don't answer it on the chat, it's too long. It's just a question about, do you agree that Ngoma has been camouflaged in our heritage? Explain. Now that's your opinion. You might think that a drum, this ancient music, this ancient, should have a bigger part in our lives today, or you might feel that it's visible enough. You know about it and you see it, so that's your opinion. Questions, there are 3 questions under number 5, and it's going to be easy for you to type for me, please, because you choose one of those 4. What is the Guma, or what is true about it? The Guma originally came from Asia, is being commercialized, is a nickname of the Ngoma, is being put on a pedestal. Which one is true? Make a choice. If you're more than one person in your group, quick agreement, make it democratic and choose one. If you're wrong, it's okay. Yes, nickname is right. Very good, you've got it. It is the nickname of the Ngoma. And 5-2. Heritage regalia. They said some people are using Heritage Day to make speeches and drape their banners and things all over the place. So what would Heritage regalia be? A worthy cause on the 24th of September? Superficial traditional decorations? A troupe of drummers in traditional dress? Or a significant artifact like the Ngoma? Heritage regalia? Which one do you think? It's actually number 2, the superficial decorations. Yes. Regalia means medals and banners and ribbons and things like that, and they are rather abusing them by putting in here. Last one in number 5, when the writer mentions, now remember I told you this man is a member of the coloured community, and when he mentions our ancestors who fought for so much, who is he thinking of? The soldiers of the South African War, the freedom fighters of the apartheid era, the San and Kuna ancestors, or the Mazbikar slaves. In this passage, Who do you think he is thinking of? Discuss at a moment and agree on a choice. Let me see. I agree with the students who said the Musbikar slaves. He's thinking of their oldest ancestors of all, the ones who brought the drum to South Africa. The Sun and Kuna ancestors, not a bad choice, but he's thinking of, because it's all about the drum, he's thinking of the people who brought the drum. Now, number 6 is a bit unfair because they don't explain in the passage what white noise is. They just use the phrase. So I'll just answer that quickly. White noise is background noise. You can hear it, it's irritating, but it's not something you need to pay attention to. For example, if you're watching TV and your set is old and there's a crackle of static on it, that static is white noise. If you live next to a railway line, people will say to you, all those trains are so loud. And you probably say, you know, I don't even hear them anymore. Because to you, it's just white noise. You don't have to pay attention to it. Good. Useful phrase to know. Now, I asked you to take note of 2 words, and this is where you're going to need them. Which word in the passage means reconciliation or fusion of differing systems of belief, as in a philosophy or religion, especially when success is partial or the result is heterogeneous? In other words, bringing together, harmonizing, but not with 100% success. In other words, he said this drum had this power, and he said that or he implied that the way the colored people enjoy it is different from the way that the black people and the white people enjoy it. So it hasn't been 100% successful in completely unifying it, but it has done some unifying work. Oh, not any group or person got that one down, so let me spell it for you again. Syncretic. It's a lovely word to know. S-Y-N-C-R-E-T-I-C, syncretic. And syncretic power means the power of bringing together, but not fusing 100%. Okay. And which was the word that meant estranged, withdrawn or unresponsive, isolated or dissociated emotionally? Come on, I think you remember this one, don't you? Don't you? Nobody. Okay, this word was alienated. And that's another important word to know. You need it in your vocabulary. You know, a person, if you have one fight with your brother, you're not alienated from your brother. But if you have done nothing but fight for 20 years until you say, I never want to see you again in my life, then you are alienated. It's a strong word. And remember that people can also be emotionally alienated from the world, in which case they really have a psychological problem. Okay, so a good word to know. And I'm afraid you don't have the bibliography in front of you anymore. It's not printed out for you, so you won't be able to do this. But what I'm going to suggest is that you take note of these questions afterwards. You know, this TUT is going to be available through Funda, and just check this and see if you can identify the article, the date that he wrote it and the date he uploaded it, the full name of Van Dyck's publisher, and the function of the colon in the Van Dyck entry. You know why this is a good exercise? It's going to help you to remember what you need to know about compiling a bibliography. And that is important. Right, good students, there's no exam for this course. So this assignment number 3 is your last shot at improving your marks. and I hope you're going to feel enriched by tackling it, and I hope you're going to be successful. So I wish you all the best, and thank you. Goodbye.